Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, good day to you, as depending where you are in the world. I'm here live in London doing my nighttime devotion. It is Monday evening. It was a long day, work-wise, Doing our nighttime devotion. The devotional is Conflict and Courage. The title today, Always the Same. No, the title is always the same, but it's not always the same as every other night. Always the same. Proverbs 22 verse 29. Seest thou a man diligent in his business? He shall stand before kings. He shall not stand before mean men. From the dungeon, Joseph was exalted to be ruler over all the land of Egypt. It was a position of high honor, yet it was beset with difficulty and peril. One cannot stand upon a lofty height without danger. As the tempest leaves unharmed the lowly flower of the valley, while it uproots the stately tree upon the mountaintop, so those who have maintained their integrity in humble life may be dragged down to the pit by the temptations that assail worldly success and honor. But Joseph's character bore the test alike of adversity and prosperity. The same fidelity to God was manifest when he stood in the palace of the Pharaohs as when in a prisoner's cell. He was still a stranger in a heathen land, separated from his kindred, the worshippers of God, but he fully believed that the divine hand had directed his steps, and in constant reliance upon God, he faithfully discharged the duties of his position. Through Joseph, the attention of the king and the great men of Egypt was directed to the true God. And though they adhered to their idolatry, they learned to respect the principles revealed in the life and the character of the worshipper of Yahweh. How was Joseph enabled to make such a record of firmness of character, uprightness, and wisdom? In his early years, he had consulted duty rather than inclination. And the integrity, the simple trust, the noble nature of the youth bore fruit in the deeds of the man. A pure and simple life had favored the vigorous development of both physical and intellectual powers. Communion with God through his works and the contemplation of the grand truths entrusted to the inheritors of faith had elevated and ennobled his spiritual nature, broadening, strengthening the mind as no other study could do. Faithful attention to duty in every station, from the lowliest to the most exalted, had been training every power for its highest service. He who lives in accordance with the Creator's will is securing themselves the truest and noblest development of character. Always the same. Always the same is referring to Joseph, whether he was in the prison cell, whether he was the slave, or whether he was of high authority. He was the same. Because of his training as a child, he was taught. Yes, he was a spoiled child. And yes, he wasn't liked by his brothers for various reasons, but the training, the teaching he had as a child bore fruit as he became a man. And he remained faithful to God in his youth, which stayed with him in his adulthood. Joseph's character bore the test of adversity and prosperity, and in either way, he was the same, always the same. Integrity, trust, noble nature, as it said, of his youth, bore fruit when he became a man. A pure and simple life favored the vigorous development of the physical and intellectual powers. Communion with God through his works and contemplation of the grand truths entrusted the inheritors of faith had elevated and ennobled his spiritual nature, broadening, strengthening his mind that no other study could do. No books in this world other than the Bible can strengthen and broaden your mind continually. That's why they call the Bible a living book. Because no matter how many times you read it, you will never fully know it. You can read one chapter, one verse 1,000 times. And the 1,011th time, it could take on a whole different meaning. On a whole deeper, more spiritual level. And you will be overwhelmed. Always the same. Remember who you are, who you were, get to know who you were born to be. Realize your purpose for your being created. And then fulfill that purpose. And you will forever be content.